Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of, well, whatever the hell this is. Initially I was just gonna call this a game analysis show, but today's video is gonna be slightly different, so I'll come up with something later. Because today's video is not gonna be a game analysis. Instead I'm gonna address something that seems to be discussed a lot lately, which is improving at Quake. Because in all those discussions the focus always seems to lie on the config, hardware, or tweaking the sensitivity. And the reason I'm making this video is because I feel like those things are only a very small part of the whole improvement process. I mean, just grab Cypher's config and his hardware into it and play with that. If he managed to become real champion using them, they aren't gonna hold you back from doing the same. But that's not what I want to talk about today. Instead I'm gonna try to analyze the thought process that lies behind improvement. To begin, let's take a look at how players usually improve. And for most players, it's just gonna be playing as much as possible. So whenever you do something in game that leads to something positive, like me hitting a rail just now, that move is subconsciously marked as good. And on the counter side, whenever something doesn't work out, it is marked as bad. And over time, players refine the game, eliminating things that have bad outcomes and only leaving those that have good ones. Now there's nothing wrong with this approach. Probably most players just play, and I'm sure many of the top players will do just that most of the time. Yet I don't think it is the most efficient way, and while it may take time to analyze and think about your game, those things help you to improve faster. But to explain how exactly you should analyze your game, I think it's important to change the way you think about the game. Most players will divide their game into aiming, timing, movement, positioning, and so on. And when you ask someone what the strengths are, he will probably say something like, well, I've got pretty good timing, I read my opponents well, but I need to work on my aim. And then this person will proceed to work on his aim by playing Clan Arena or something. The problem with this is that many people feel like they maxed out their skill in all those areas. I've spoken to a lot of players who feel like their aim is bad, but they simply can't aim any better. And they time only one item, but when they do more they end up confusing them. And overall they feel like they do the right things, they just don't seem to have a payoff. And generally it's common that players simply don't know what they need to improve, and what exactly it is they need to get better at. A symptom of this is something that seems to happen pretty often, which is when after a loss players ask something along the lines of, what did I do wrong? What do I need to improve? And I know from my own experience that as I was just starting out, I was always trying to put my finger on what I was doing wrong. Like, should I play more aggressive? Should I camp more with rockets? But with time I came to realize that these kinds of questions aren't the key to success. Perhaps the outcome of a few specific games could change depending on such decisions, but actual improvement works differently. The demo you've had the pleasure of admiring throughout the video is from about a year ago, and I hope it helps to illustrate this point. All the lines stand for mistakes I've made that I wouldn't have made today anymore. And unless you're a semi-pro or professional player, believe me, I could probably find as many mistakes in one of your demos. Now, some mistakes are pretty obvious. I mean here, what the hell am I even doing? But a lot of the lines I've made will probably cause confusion, because there aren't apparent mistakes. Much rather these are missed opportunities to line up rail shots, to spam rockets, to block off waves with nades, and so on. And naturally in game you aren't going to realize missed opportunities. So the big question is, how can you learn those things? The approach that I think is the most efficient is dividing the game into different situations. The situation could be anything. When you play ZTN and you're down at the Mega and your opponent is spamming nades from above, that's a situation. If you play T7 and you're at the shards in the Mega room and Mega and Red both spawn in 5 seconds, that's a situation. If you play Airwalk and you're at the bottom of the stairway to the red armor and your opponent is above, that's a situation. I mean, you get it. And during every game you play, try to take note of which situations you have the most trouble with, and afterwards try to think about them and figure out how to do better. And often this will be enough. So let's just take an example. You just played a game of T7, also known as Furious Heights, and you've noticed you keep getting damage when you try to pick up the yellow armor next to the railgun. And so you think a little bit and you figure out, actually you can first go through the tally to check if someone's above, and afterwards drop down to the yellow. And so you adapt that and keep playing, and then sometime this happens. So you think again, and you realize players can anticipate you checking above first, and just wait out. So then you might come up with something like this, which is what I usually do, which seems to work pretty well. But then there are more complex situations. For example, playing out of control on Airwalk, where you simply can't figure out what to do, and anything you attempt seems to be countered. To address this, I'd like to throw in a short chess segment. So, the chess grandmaster Emanuel Lasker was once approached by a man who told him his son was a child prodigy and wants to challenge him to a game. He offered Lasker $500 if he beat his son, and if by any chance Lasker would lose, he would have to pay $2,000. Lasker, obviously confident there is no way he could lose, accepted the challenge. However, the game was to be played by correspondence as to cause the least trouble, which basically means that they transferred their moves by mail. At first, Lasker took the game lightly, but as it progressed got into a lot of difficulties and only narrowly managed to edge out a victory. The man paid him the $500 without hesitation. Then, sometime later, when talking to another grandmaster called Capablanca, Lasker recalled the incident. As it turned out, the exact same thing had happened to Capablanca, with the difference that he lost the game. So in reality, the two have been made to play against each other, and with this small trick, anyone could easily draw or beat a grandmaster. Just play two of them simultaneously and repeat the moves from one board on the other. Now, how does this at all apply to Quake? Well, let's go with an example. We're on Airwalk, and you've noticed that some players give you a lot of trouble when you try to get a weapon. And you just don't see how you can avoid getting killed here if your opponent hits his shots. So turn the board around. Try to do exactly what players do against you, and once it doesn't work, you figure out a way to beat it. So let's see what happens here. You wait for your opponent to run across so you can hit the rail, but then you hear him to the left, and you see he just went through the telly to get to the upper level and avoid getting railed. And now spams nades towards the telly so you can't go through, and finally spams nades towards you while crouch walking to the railgun. Let's check this one out now. So the player first fakes going across a few times, baiting you into a premature shot, and then goes through the telly and drops back down, and finally seems to completely throw you off and manages to get away with the rocket launcher. Thankfully you can replay the demo with a wall-hack effect to see what actually happened, so you can see that he hid behind the wall and then jumped across when you weren't watching. Or of course you can always ask your opponent to send you the demo after a game. And this way you just learned a bunch of moves that reduce the risk of you getting railed and aid you in getting weapons. The great thing about this method is that you can pretty much force any situation to happen to see how your opponent reacts. Then again, if you have trouble with a very common situation, say you don't know how to best react when you get a certain starting spawn, you should definitely check out some demos or WODs of good players who will mostly have it down to perfection. So that's pretty much it. There's 3 more advice I want to give you though that you can listen to while you watch some classic Weird Rage, just so you don't get too bored staring at the black screen. First of all, you should try to play against players who are about your skill as much as possible. If you only play against better players, there's going to be a strong bias towards situations out of control, and if you only play worse players, you just won't learn much. And you might even get into the habit of doing things that might work against weak opponents but would never be possible against good players. Another thing that I would advise is to stick to one map during practices, instead of voting a new map after every game. You can even take it further and only play 1 or 2 maps in general, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. When you play all the maps, you're going to be improving on all of them equally, but if you only play one map, you improve much faster on this one map. And the great thing about that is that very soon you might be able to challenge players who you previously might have deemed way better than yourself, which, believe me, gives a great boost to your motivation. Of course, after some time, when your improvement on the map starts to stagnate, you need to realize that and start playing the others. The third advice is not to take every practice game too seriously. I've quite frequently seen players play extremely defensive in all of their games. And this is a legitimate strategy, and if you play officials, that might be the thing you want to do. However, in practices, by playing conservative, you first of all will have much less time spent in combat and more standing around, which doesn't help you much, but also trying some crazy aggressive things, even if they don't work out most of the time, is important, just so you see what happens, and sometimes you will find moves that seem crazy at first, but will often catch opponents off guard, and also make you much more unpredictable. Don't worry too much about losing in practice games, after all that's what they're for. If you guys have any questions concerning specific situations, feel free to ask in the comments, and maybe I can do some short videos on a few of them, or perhaps I'll just answer in private. Anyway, the next real video is going to be a game analysis again, so subscribe to get noticed when it's getting released, and stay tuned. Bye bye.